Cecilia is a young nun who moved to a seemingly perfect countryside in Italy for a job offer at an illustrious convent. Cecilia received a warm welcome at first. That was until she discovered a dark secret hidden in her new home. The movie begins inside a convent, where a young nun named Sister Mary is seen praying. After her prayer, she sneaked into a senior nun's room to steal the keys and attempt to escape. When she couldn't open the gate, Sister Mary squeezed herself between the bars of the gate. But her leg was caught by one of the three hooded figures chasing after her, and she screamed in pain as the person broke her leg. She blacked out due to the pain, and when she woke up, she found herself buried alive. Sister Cecilia is a young woman of devout faith who had just arrived in the beautiful Italian countryside for a new role a priest called Father Sal Tedeschi offered her. She reached an exclusive convent where dying nuns are tended to during their remaining days. She received a warm welcome and was toured around by another sister named Isabel. Sister Isabel then showed Cecilia her room. Sister Isabel appeared to be annoyed at her presence and advised her to leave now before she changes her mind later. But Cecilia's mind was already made up. Cecilia then met and befriended another sister named Gwen before preparing herself for the ceremony. During the ceremony, Cecilia was delighted to see Father Tedeschi again. After the ceremony, Cecilia talked to Father Tedeschi, who told him about how he came to love the convent. Then Cecilia opened up about her past, which led her to decide to be a nun. When she was 12 years old, Cecilia used to like walking on top of a frozen lake until the ice broke and she fell into the water. She almost drowned underneath the ice and was declared dead for 7 minutes. Cecilia was grateful to God for saving her, and she believed that she was given another chance to serve a purpose. So when Father Sal Tedeschi invited her to join the exclusive Italian convent, she immediately accepted. After the ceremony, Cecilia was in the bathroom when she heard a cry coming from somewhere. She wondered where the sound was coming from and followed it to find a nun kneeling as she cried and prayed. She comforted the nun and backed away in fear when the nun looked back at her, showing a faceless face. The Reverend Mother appeared and pulled her to the altar, where she grabbed a large rusty nail from inside a glass box. The Reverend Mother states that it is a nail taken from the cross on which Jesus Christ was crucified, and then showed Cecilia her hand with a hole in it, just like Jesus' palm. The Reverend Mother claims that it was a symbol of forgiveness for all the sins she committed, and Cecilia, disturbed by the sight of the Reverend Mother's hand, passed out. After regaining consciousness, Cecilia talked to the Cardinal, but the latter wasn't answering. She called out to the Cardinal, but then multiple arms grabbed her from behind, and she found herself bound with hooded figures standing before her. Hands grabbed her face, and Cecilia woke up from her nightmare. She looked at the door and saw a figure staring at her, slowly approaching. Cecilia opened the lampshade to see clearly, but didn't see anyone by the door. During breakfast, the Reverend Mother was speaking to all of them, while Cecilia was giggling around with Gwen. The Reverend Mother noticed and reprimanded the two young sisters. The young nuns then learned the ropes of the exclusive convent. She and Gwen had fun together as they worked tirelessly, and the young nuns tended to a dying older nun before she took her last breath. Cecilia noticed Sister Isabel staring at her, but when a white sheet shortly blocked her view, she didn't see Sister Isabel anymore. Later that night, Cecilia was about to fall asleep when an older nun suddenly cut her hair. Cecilia was confused but didn't think much of it as she led the older nun back to the clinic where the sickly nuns are. Before she left, she noticed a scar on another nun's feet in the shape of a cross. The next day, Cecilia was taking a bath with the other young nuns, and Gwen was telling her how she joined the convent. Gwen used to live with her ex-boyfriend who used to hit her. Gwen hit him back before leaving him. Gwen had nowhere to go when she found a convent and saw nuns living in it. She thought that the nuns were lucky to have a place where they could live, sleep, and eat for free. So she decided to join the convent, though that does not mean that she does not believe in God. She does, but she isn't as devoted as the other nuns. Cecilia was just silently listening to Gwen when she suddenly felt sick. She had a checkup, and while waiting for the result, she noticed a figure outside. She watched the figure for a while but was frightened when a bird fell in front of her. Cecilia was then summoned to the cardinal's office, where she was interrogated. The cardinal asked her if she had committed the sin of breaking her vows before she joined the convent, and Father Tedeschi comforted her into telling the truth, mistaking Cecilia's confusion for reluctance. However, Cecilia still insisted that she had never broken any of her vows after promising herself to God. Everyone was shocked to hear this, and Father Tedeschi asked if Cecilia had had a sexual encounter with a man before. Cecilia had never been in a relationship, and she is still a virgin. The doctor checked on Cecilia again, and they couldn't believe it when they discovered that she was indeed pregnant. The Cardinal and Father Tedeschi were delighted, as they thought that Cecilia was the next Virgin Mary. They held a ceremony to celebrate the miracle God had given them. However, Sister Isabel and Gwen did not look happy at all. Cecilia reached the second trimester, and she started noticing odd things happening. She was vomiting when she found that one of her teeth had fallen off. She headed to the dining area, and everyone besides Gwen stood to greet her with a smile, only sitting back down when Cecilia had been seated. A senior nun handed her breakfast and reminded her not to walk around while pregnant. Gwen expressed her annoyance at the sister's behavior toward Cecilia, but deep inside, she was just worried for her friend. After breakfast, Cecilia was relaxing in the bathtub when someone suddenly pushed her under the water. She found that it was Isabel, and she struggled as Isabel attempted to drown her. But a senior nun came running in with two younger nuns, and the nuns pulled an angry Isabel away, with the latter screaming about how it should have been her. The doctor checked on Cecilia, and Father Tedeschi was relieved to know that the baby was okay. But Cecilia wasn't okay. She was traumatized and confused about what happened. She told them about what Isabel was screaming as she was being pulled away. Isabel believes that it should have been her in Cecilia's position, and the latter doesn't understand what that means. Father Tedeschi comforted her, saying that it was just jealousy, but Isabel would never be able to harm her again. Cecilia demanded to go to the hospital and see another doctor, as she didn't think the convent's doctor, Dr. Gallo, was doing a good job. She told Father Tedeschi about her puking out one of her teeth, but Father Tedeschi insisted that it was nothing, and that she's perfectly healthy. After what happened with Isabel, Cecilia became a lot more alert and suspicious of the other nuns. While walking down the hallway one day, she noticed two nuns staring at her from a window. Suddenly, someone jumped from the rooftop, and when Cecilia went to see who it was, she was horrified to realize that it was Isabel. As they were walking with the other nuns to bury Isabel, Gwen was whispering to Cecilia, telling Cecilia to open her eyes and see that no one in the convent can be trusted. Gwen had never trusted anyone, and now that odd things are happening to Cecilia, it just convinced her even more that the senior members of the convent are hiding something. Father Tedeschi noticed them talking and approached them, asking what was wrong. But Gwen just screamed at everyone, asking them how they could be so indifferent to Isabel's death. She kept on insulting the convent and all the superiors in it, until she got pulled away by Father Tedeschi and Deacon Enzo. Cecilia was sitting on her bed when a picture frame on the wall got loose and almost fell. She noticed something written behind the frame and saw a Bible verse written in Italian. She read that it was 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14, and looked for it in her English Bible. Cecilia was surprised when she read the words, "Satan himself often masquerades as an angel of light," and she finally started believing that Gwen must have been telling the truth. She sneaked into Gwen's room, but didn't see her inside. So she sneaked into the cardinal's office and read through her own files. She found a cutout newspaper about the accident she narrowly escaped. Cecilia flinched in surprise when she heard a scream, and she sneakily followed where the sound was coming from. The screams got louder, and she peeked through the keyhole to see inside the room where she heard the screams coming. Cecilia's tears streamed down her cheeks as she witnessed a seemingly faceless nun cutting Gwen's tongue off. Cecilia slowly backed away from the door and was surprised when a sickly nun covered her mouth to prevent her from screaming. It was the same nun who cut a few pieces of her hair. The sickly nun smiled and handed her a cross with her hair wrapped around it. Cecilia asked the nun to help her and escape with her, but the nun ominously told her that no one can ever leave the convent. One day, nurses were woken up by the sound of Cecilia's screams. They, along with Father Tedeschi, rushed to Cecilia's room and found her bleeding a lot. Cecilia begged Father Tedeschi to help her, as she didn't want to die, and Father Tedeschi decided to rush her to the nearest hospital. However, it was all just an act. A nurse stayed in Cecilia's room, praying beside the bloody bed, when she realized that the blood smelled different. She found a bag underneath the bed and realized that the blood was actually a dead chicken's blood. On their way to the hospital, Father Tedeschi received a call and found out that Cecilia was just pretending to have a miscarriage so she could escape. Cecilia knew she had been caught and ran out of the car, but she was in no shape to run faster, and Father Tedeschi easily caught her. She was brought back to the convent, and a senior nun aggressively bathed her while chastising her for attempting to escape. When Cecilia talked back, the senior nun smacked her in the face. Cecilia was then restrained in a wheelchair in front of the altar of the crucifixion nail. Father Tedeschi put on his gloves and took the nail, showing it to Cecilia as he explained to her what he had been planning on all along. Father Tedeschi was a geneticist before he became a priest. Using his skills and knowledge in the study of genes and heredity, he took DNA samples from the crucifixion nail and used them to create a new Jesus Christ. For 20 years, Father Tedeschi only had failures until Cecilia entered the picture, and he was finally successful in creating another Virgin Mary who would birth the new Jesus. Father Tedeschi brought Cecilia to the basement and showed her the jars containing the fetus. Only a few of the fetuses looked normal, while most looked monstrous. Father Tedeschi pushed her to another room again, and Deacon Enzo, his assistant, grabbed Cecilia's leg up so Father Tedeschi could burn Cecilia's feet with the shape of a cross. Then Cecilia was locked into a room to prevent her from escaping again. In her third trimester, Cecilia talked to the cardinal with teary eyes as she pulled her nail out of her finger. The doctor checked on her baby again and left her afterward with the Reverend Mother. While the Reverend Mother was busy looking at the baby through the monitor, Cecilia discreetly grabbed the crucifix and beat the Reverend Mother to death with it. Cecilia steps out of her room and holds back the pain scream she was about to let out due to her water breaking. The cardinal was smoking as he watched the choir sing when Cecilia sneaked behind him. She killed the cardinal by strangling him with a rosary and was caught by Dr. Gallo, who ran away in fear. Cecilia thought nothing of him and headed straight to the basement, pouring ethanol all over Father Tedeschi's lab and lighting up the lighter when Father Tedeschi appeared. Cecilia felt her belly hurting again and doubled over in pain, giving Father Tedeschi enough time to stop her from setting his lab on fire. Cecilia grabbed a flask and smashed it on Father Tedeschi's head before running away. Cecilia locked Father Tedeschi inside the lab, but the priest grabbed her by the hair, preventing her from escaping. Cecilia grabbed his finger to try and escape, but Father Tedeschi just pulled her back with his other hand. Cecilia lit up her lighter and dropped it on the ground, setting both Father Tedeschi and the lab on fire. However, Father Tedeschi managed to save himself and broke through the door. Cecilia went down the stairs and found herself in the catacombs underneath the convent. Cecilia frantically ran around looking for a way out before she stopped for a while. Cecilia felt fear creeping up inside when she heard a voice calling out to her and looked around the chamber she was in. Cecilia was frightened when she opened up the lights and found Gwen's mutilated body. She left the chamber and looked for a way out until she saw daylight peeking through a hole big enough for her to crawl into. However, Father Tedeschi caught her before she could escape, and he started chanting rituals as he cut Cecilia's belly in an attempt to get her baby. Cecilia was in extreme pain, but still managed to grab the crucifixion nail and stab Father Tedeschi's throat with it. Father Tedeschi dropped dead, and Cecilia crawled out through the hole. Right outside, she fell on her knees and screamed as she gave birth to her baby. Cecilia was horrified at the sight of her baby, and though the baby was unseen, it was still understood that Cecilia's baby must have turned into some kind of monster, as it let out inhuman gurgling sounds. Cecilia cut the umbilical cord with her teeth and grabbed a nearby rock, screaming as she smashed her monstrous baby with it.